I suppose there is no one who, at some time or other, has not gone to a friend, a neighbor, or a relative for advice. And civilization has followed this general pattern since the beginning. We have always turned to our fellow creature in time of trouble if we feel that that person is capable of being of practical assistance. And many are. And in the days before the rise of professional psychiatry and psychology, the favorite source of inspiration was the local minister. And if he wasn't quite able to handle some practical problem, there was nearly always someone in the community who had a reputation for solving things. Usually the solutions were simple, direct, and obvious, but they were backed by years of experience. So we may say that in the problem of seeking counsel or help, we must try to find persons capable of providing experience information. Too many people trying to help someone just tell what they feel about it. Or if I was you, I wouldn't do that. There is no particular background of insight. The individual who is giving the advice has probably never faced that particular type of situation, and if he has, he may have handled it badly. So the problem of trying to help people, as George Bernard Shaw remarked on one occasion, is the most dangerous occupation that we know. We can get into trouble that way, and of course today trouble is not taken as it used to be, as something expected and almost inevitable. Trouble is now the basis of litigation, lawsuits, broken homes, ruptured families, and almost anything you want to think about. So here we are gathered as a group of people trying to improve ourselves. We want to grow, we want to find out a little more about the values of life so that we can live better. In order to do this, we must search in many cases for some outside assistance. Perhaps we will read a book that we feel has a good answer, or we discuss it with someone whom we regard as authoritative or informed. But always the individual who gives advice has certain responsibilities that he must face. In other words, in order to give advice, it is very definitely necessary to examine our own inner natures. Why do we do this? Is it because we really feel that we are informed? Are we actually able to handle the situation that is brought to us? Or do we try to bluff through on some platitude that has never worked for ourselves? So we have to be careful that we are not trying to play an instructor when we lack the information necessary. It is very important that those who give advice examine their own natures and find out how they themselves have handled difficult situations. Unless they are able to prove conclusively inside of their own minds that they can make a valid contribution to the problem of another person, it is much better to simply decline to pass judgment, because we may be only adding to the prevailing problem. Actually, also, most people like to be suspected of being capable of handling problems for others. We like to feel that we have a certain leadership, that we have a sphere of influence over the lives of those around us. This is really a little more than egotism. It is just a certain sense of self-satisfaction. It has nothing to do with the facts. But if by any chance we are personally ambitious to be recognized as a source of information, that we may often go beyond our natural abilities. We will answer questions that would never meet the requirements of our own experience. Things that never could have happened to us we will try to pass judgment on or tell someone else how to take care of the situation. This goes on year after year, and nearly every family has in it somewhere an advice giver who nearly always is the one most in need of advice themselves. They may be well-intentioned, good-natured, kindly people, but many of them simply try to advise by imposing their own temperament upon the other person they are trying to help. It's one of the most common introductions to an advice cycle is, "If I were you." Well, this in itself is a dead negative. The other person is not us. Our way of doing things may not have any bearing upon theirs. And may be well to note that these people who have been giving this information have done what they would have done under certain circumstances, and it came out badly. Therefore, this type of advice does not work. If we are in positions where we know that advice is necessary, we can look back on the family patterns of long ago. Hundreds of years back, maybe thousands of years back, the primary source of strength was a family unit in which up to 2 and sometimes 3 generations were alive at the same time. These 3 generations formed a basic experience pattern which they tried to share and pass on to the young. These close family patterns were based upon the common experience of the family unit. The advice given would be applicable to the people for whom it was given. They would be part of the same situation that had caused a father or grandmother to come to certain conclusions about life. So in the family unit, it was a more or less self-protecting thing. There were very few religious arguments 500 or 1,000 years ago, because most persons belonged to a community of religious life which was suitable to all of them. So in those days, the elders were probably the source of instruction. This was true in the American Indian psychology. The wisdom of the tribe was vested in the olds. The olds were either alive or had gone, but their wisdom lived on. When anything went wrong and there was doubt, the problem was carried to the elders, and the elders in council attempted to assist the solution. The elders were those who had lived long, had been through much, had suffered a great deal, and had gradually integrated an inner life that was secure and proper. This wisdom they could pass on to the young, and the young in those days were very happy to get it. They were quite aware that they were sharing in a continuity of convictions, that as it had always been solved before, so it would be solved again. So the Indians really had a very tight way of approaching this particular problem. They had the medicine priest, and in the Indian philosophy, medicine meant sacred. And all problems were brought to this sort of mystic elder, whose word was law, whose decisions were final, but in all cases were based upon the old wisdom of the people who had gone before, those who had lived long, who had labored hard, and had died bravely in the defense of their tribe. So this type of wisdom became the basis of guiding new generations. Now, the younger generations were not too difficult to guide at that time for one very important reason. They respected the olds. They respected because they saw every day the value of the wisdom that had been accumulated from a lifetime of experience. These young people did not question, because in their hearts and minds they knew that the elders were better informed, had the proper solutions to problems. Now, of course, this is very largely broken up. There is no such a pattern anymore in most cases, although among a number of Amerindian groups the reestablishment of this concept of counseling has been more or less reestablished. It is this close contact with the natural problems of things that helps to make the proper counselor. Now, the Bible, the Old Testament particularly, has to do with the prophets and priestly ones of old. There were those who, out of the wisdom of years or by mystical experiences within themselves, were wonderfully gifted, and even the rulers listened with great attention and were careful not to offend those upon whom the Spirit of the Lord had descended and had given them jurisdiction over the acts of mankind. Now, these old priestly ones were not just simply wise in the professorial sense of the word. They did not speak from an academic background. They spoke from the experience of the ages. They spoke also from a lifetime of constant service to their fellow man. They did not have many ideas of their own. All the ideas that they had been handed down in the scriptures or in the teachings of the fathers. So there was, again, a kind of descent of infallibles, things that always had worked, things that always did solve, and which the new generation was willing to apply to their own problems. As the family ties broke and the situation scattered, a great deal of this wisdom has been no longer available to the average person. So today, if we have a problem on our hands and we want help, we cannot simply ask somebody. We cannot take it over the fence with the neighbor. We cannot go down the street into a friend who plays bridge with us on Tuesday evenings. These are not the ways in which we can hope to find solutions. Of course, the first problem, when faced with difficulty, is to look inside yourself. If you can be completely honest with yourself, you are the best counselor you will ever have. But many people are not capable of that degree of impersonality. They are bound to sit on one end of the scales where they weigh a problem. Instead of following the fact of the problem, they follow the implications that they wish to recognize. But if a problem arises, every individual should really say to himself, have I done everything possible to solve this problem? To what degree am I at fault in a critical situation that is developing? It is much better to do this yourself than to pay $1,000 for an analyst to do it for you. And he may come up exactly with the same answer. But the question first of all is, can we solve it ourselves? Can we solve it perhaps with a little encouragement? Someone that we know and believe in can say, I think you can solve it yourself. You have the proper knowledge, you have the courage, you have the strength of character and the integrity to solve your own problem. Now, this isn't giving advice, it is simply pointing up the possible potential of self-analysis. Well, if it happens that the problem could be within a range of self-analysis, then it's very wise to take the position, in my situation, have I been doing what I should have done, or have I been doing what I wanted to do? And if these two are not the same thing, they can explain a great many difficulties. It is always in our way of thinking that we want to be happy, we want to be comfortable, we want to have every privilege possible to us. But the question then arises, how far can we carry this without damaging other people or debilitating our own ethics? Very often, if we think a little while, we can see why things have not gone badly. We begin to understand how a bad investment may have crippled us financially, perhaps only because we tried to get more profit than was reasonable. All the way along, the individual has to curb his own appetites. He has to put a certain restriction upon his own ambitions. He must live within the area of his own available intelligence. And if he does not do this, he is bound ultimately to come to difficulty.